what he does. There are other kinds of puppets besides hand puppets. There's marionettes. Anybody seen marionettes in there? Okay. There's stick puppets. And there's also this little guy right here. They're called lumberjacks. This is a kind of puppet people have been making for about 500 years. I made this little guy. I'll do a little dance for him. Now, think about a 3-year-old. When they see this, they think it's alive and it's real. And if I let him start walking towards them, they'll jump backwards. Because it's real to them. And that's puppets. That's the neat thing about puppets. You can actually help them with their imaginations. They're imagining it, and it's real to them. And eventually they know it's just a toy or some kind of a stuffed animal type of thing. But they learn. It's really cool. So anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to add about puppets? Anybody already using a puppet? What's your puppet pal's name?
I have a few of them.
Okay. You have a favorite?
My bee.
Your bee.
So because I'm substituting at Strong Start, so when I come in, that's my guy. They all know him now, and that's who gives them their stickers.
Okay.
So they wait for him. But at the beginning, yeah, they were nervous of him coming near them.
So he's definitely your ally. Yeah. How about you?
I use the slippery fish, the song. I use sea creatures.
Okay.
So,
And do you have a particular one that's your favorite?
I give all the kids one because I don't have for each
Oh, okay.
kid.
And they're all the same?
Well, they're all different. Like, because I don't know if you know the song Slippery Fish.
Oh, sure.
Like I have an octopus, a shark, a whale, and all those creatures in the song.
That's great. Anybody else?
I have a Leo. It's his book from a dollar store, and inside you open it up, and there's a puppet inside the book. So he goes to each page and he turns the page and he tells a story or whatever. So now everyone's like, "Where's Leo? Can we get him on the place?" And now we just take him and he tells a different story every time.
That's great. That's great. Using puppets for stories is really, I do that a lot. I mean, have the puppet ask for a story or ask for a song. You can get the puppet to ask the children to sing. Right? Sing me a song. Sing me a song. You know, they'll sing a song for a puppet way better than they'll sing one for you. I mean, it's like it makes it more fun. Anybody else have a puppet?
Just do that.
Yet?
Bath puppets.
I'm sorry?
Keep a little, those bath.
Oh, right,
baths,
right.
and just keep them with the books in a circle kind of area, and then just bath them and use them. It helps them be more engaged.
I didn't bring one, but you can take a white sock, pull it onto your hand, draw 2 eyes on the knuckles, and take a rubber band around it for the mouth, and you've got a puppet. That's how simple it is. They don't have to be fancy. That's why you can just buy a stuffed animal and turn it into a puppet. It's really not about professional puppets. It's more about you learning to use it as a tool, as an ally for your work. Because you're with them every day for 6 or 8 or 10 hours. And you need these things to make your work more fun for you. Because it's more fun when you're playing with puppets than it is when you're not. Anybody else over here have a puppet?
I have the raccoon in the garbage can,
Okay.
and his name's Rascal. But he's always down at the garbage can, and he's kind of sitting at the front of the circle when I do circle. So when they walk in, they're like, I know who's going to see you. I'm like, "Ooh." So when I start it, he's in my hand, and he'll pop up when I'm looking this way. And every time that I call, oh, he's there, I'll put him down again. So it's kind of a game that's peekaboo up and down.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes he'll bring things in the garbage can. So it's the guessing, what did he bring today? But they just love the idea of just him kind of coming up. I
Sure.
said, do you think he's in there? I said, oh, he's sleeping because he hasn't come up. And they always call him out, but archery is really, really like him.
I've seen them. I don't use them myself, but there are puppets that are people puppets. And I think they're a really good thing to do. I notice with animal puppets, the kids tend to hit them because they're animals and they're a little bit afraid of them. And one of the things I do is I'll have everybody sit in a circle and I'll say, okay, the puppet's going to come around. Put your feet out and the puppet will crawl across their feet. And so they can touch them if they want. It's kind of an experiment to see how they're going to act out. And some kids will just smack it, or some kids will back off. And you get to feel out who's having what reaction to the puppet. I have a little porcupine puppet. And he looks like he's covered with needles. He's totally soft, but he looks the way they made him. It's a folk medicine. And it's awesome. And they're afraid to touch him. But somebody will eventually touch him. And somebody will hit him. So it's part of it's teaching them not to hit the puppets and be gentle, and then they learn. And after that, you can let them hug the puppet. So it's kind of in stages. You first let them just walk around, maybe then they get to hug it, and depending on the type of puppet it is, they do different things. I have a unicorn puppet where they get to touch its horn. But please don't pull the horn off. You know? And it's part of it's teaching them some manners, and they learn a lot of manners in Circle Time. All right, anybody else? Anything you want to add about puppets? We'll go on to stories.
You know what the lamb chops puppet voice is?
Their voice?
Yeah, you know.
Well, there's Charlie Horse and Lamb Chops and Hush Puppy. There's three puppets that she uses.
Yeah.
I really don't know how she does
Because
it.
I just remembered I have a lamb chops puppet. So I'm gonna
You're going to have to get a video of Sherry Lewis. Try to, or just you could give it your own voice. It's not on television anymore, is it? Sherry Lewis? It's been years since it's been on, so you probably have to get a video of it if you want to try to copy her voice, or just give it a new voice. You know? Don't call it Lamb Chops either. If you call it Lamb Chops, then anybody who's familiar with Lamb Chops, well, because it just looks just like a little sheep, right? Yeah, it's pretty simple. I've seen them. They're very cool. Anybody else have something they want to add?
I have Joey.
Joey?
Joey, he looks like a little boy. Puppet. And I usually use it to start Circle with the opening song. But then I'll say, well, where can Joey be? Where can he be? And they all know it's in my bag. So when you showed how you got the puppet out of the bag in a more like unique way, I'd like to try that. They know the answer already. It's in your bag.
Right.
This is old.
But it's part of creating an illusion.
So I've never really
Think of how a magician tricks.
been more creative about how I bring it up. So.
It's kind of the power of suggestion. You're giving them, oh, I'm going to get my puppet out and then start talking to it, and making it move around and do something in there. It can throw something out of your bag. You know, what you throwing out of there for? It's to them, they don't know what's going to happen, and they're just watching to see what you're going to do. You had your hand up?
Yeah, I have a monkey, and if we get chapters or the different puppet stores, but I tried so hard to manipulate the mouth, and it would never really catch their imagination. But when I stopped talking, and then his hands would cover his eyes, and he could look shy or embarrassed. And I would use him. I use him bongo, because the bongos when they activate, and like when we go to like wash our hands, he gets it wrong, but the kids know. So I'll be like, okay, Bongo, what do we wash before snack? And okay, Bongo, wash your nose. No! And I'm like, Bongo, no. And then he goes like that, and I go, try again. So the kids,
So
are
you do all
the teachers.
without the puppet having a voice.
Without, yeah.
That's great, that's
he will
great.
just
Yeah,
whisper to me, because I can't, it just doesn't seem to, I can't get my hand in there, it just never worked. But the hand, the arms you can manipulate, and he just gets that, he just looks so, his expression is so adorable, right?
So due to the small hand puppet, you created a mind puppet, which is just as good as a talking puppet. He's still communicating to it.
Yeah.
And that's that. If you're uncomfortable with doing the voice thing, you have to work harder at that.
Yeah,
It takes more time to figure that out.
The mouth and the voice, I just turn, and he whispers to me, and then I'm his voice. And when he's like, no, Bongo, and then he's like, he gets shy, like, no, we'll try again. And it just builds on that, and it's just, different things. But it really works with the hand, because then wash your tummy, no, wash your nose, no, and then but maybe 2 or 3, not too long, because you start to go crazy, right?
No, that's excellent.
But, and then it's like wash your hands, and I can make his hands, and then it's like yes, and then somehow we bring them down and go wash our hands.
That's a very good point, because you don't have to have a voice for your puppet. It can make one animal sound, or it can make nothing. It can just do things. It can pick something up and drop it, or do something that you don't want the children to do, and then you have to talk to the puppet, and then the puppet will get shy and hide his face. And you can have him hide your arm or something. Just do things that kids do, and they love it. You can use, humor with children is another point we could spend some time on. What is funny to children? An adult not being able to do something they can do is very funny. I have a friend that's
anything is funnier than turning a banana into a telephone. Like, that gets them every time.
I have a friend that's a clown, and he said the funniest thing he ever did for kids was not being able to sit on a chair. He would try to sit on a chair and fall off, and to them they thought that was the funniest thing they ever saw, because they can sit on a chair, or they can say that word. How come you can't? And that's what's funny to children. So if you want to get them laughing, either have a puppet do it or you do it. If you don't mind being laughed at, which comedians get paid a lot of money for people to laugh at them. So I think it's okay. All right, we're going to move on to storytelling now. The art of storytelling has been around for thousands of years. People have done storytelling in one form or another, every culture around the world, throughout history. As soon as people learned how to talk, they started telling stories. Storytelling for children is very special. It's an experience that's different than reading them a story. When you have a book, and you read the story, you turn and show them the pages and show them the pictures. And they're using their imaginations to visualize what's going on in the story, but they're also looking at a picture. And they use that as kind of a crutch in a way to create their own pictures. But when you tell a story, they have to use their imaginations. So if you tell an animal story or a particular character story, they have to visualize that. And something happens to them. If you watch their eyes, they dilate. And they become kind of almost hypnotized. Storytelling is almost like hypnosis. And they start imagining the whole story. And when you finish, they'll say, do it again. Because you took them somewhere that they don't get to go very often. When you're reading a story that doesn't happen the same. They always want to hear the same story over and over again. But when you tell a story, it's magic. It's just amazing. I've done it for a long time, and they love stories. And they like long stories. After they've gotten used to the process of learning, say, 1 minute long stories or 2 minute long stories. Sherry Lewis has a book of 101 1-minute long stories, to read out loud or to learn how to tell. As a storyteller, you have to find a story that you like. You have to like it a lot. Because you're going to tell it 1,000 times in your life. You better like it, or you have to keep finding new ones. And there's a story for every season. There's a story for every event. There's a story for every occurrence that happens in your classroom. Birthday stories, animal stories, true stories about yourself, fairy tales, folk tales. Children love animal stories. I call those folk tales. In the public library, we're in the library right now. I think it's J395 is where all the folk tales are. And you might have folk tales from every culture in the world. And you're looking for a story, and you go through them and you can't find any. It's like you go through hundreds of stories, and all of a sudden one go, that's it! And you find it, and you get all excited, I found one. And then you learn it, and then you start telling it. And you don't tell it verbatim. It's not like memorizing a poem. You tell it in your own words. And then you go back and read it again. And then you tell it again sometime. You might tell it to a friend, not the kids, a few times before you tell it to children. Practice it a little bit. And get to know the story. Like I started out doing Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Jack and the Beanstalk, and Little Red Riding Hood. Those are the first 3 stories I learned. And then I started finding books that had stories that I learned or heard as a child, and I started learning those. But you have to love it, or you're not going to learn it, you're not going to enjoy telling it. So your own enthusiasm for a story sells it in a way. If you really like it, they'll like it too. And if you're not really happy with the story you're reading out loud, they're not going to like it either. So isn't that when you pick books out, don't you have to find one you like? So I'm going to tell you all a story. This is a story I learned as a child, and it's a story about the Big Dipper. Anybody know what the Big Dipper is? You know what a dipper is? In the old days, they didn't have sinks. They had buckets of water, and they'd hang a dipper on the bucket, and it was usually made of tin, and then they'd drink out of that, or they'd pour that into a pitcher or whatever. So this is an old story, and you can tell this to anybody you want to, because it's public domain. Nobody owns the story. It's been around for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. Long time ago, there's a little girl who lived with her mother. They lived in a little cottage. They didn't have very much in the cottage. They had beds, and they had a table and chairs, and they had a little sink where they kept a bucket full of water. Hanging on that bucket was an old tin dipper. And when they wanted some water, they would dip some water out of the bucket and put it in a cup and drink it. In order to fill the bucket, they had to go out to a well. And there they would tie a rope around the bucket and lower it down into the well, fill it up with water, and bring it home. One day the mother got ill. She couldn't get out of bed. Excuse me, I'm going to drink some water. She just laid in the bed and she said, "Oh, no, I don't feel very well, but I'm very thirsty. Please bring me some water." And the little girl went over to the bucket and she looked down and the bucket was empty. So she put the dipper down in the sink. She took the bucket out to the well and she tied a rope around it and she lowered it down under the ground. And hit the bottom. Instead of going splash, it went clunk, or the well had gone dry. She pulled the bucket back out of there and she said, "Mother, the well's dry. I'm going to go out to the forest to the spring, and I'll fill the dipper up with some nice, cool spring water for you." So she took the old tin dipper out into the forest. She got to the spring. She filled it up with some nice, cool water. Now she had to carry it very carefully. She didn't want to spill it. So she walked very slowly, and it was starting to get dark. She could barely see her way home, and as she walked, she met a dog. The dog went, and that's how dogs tell you they're thirsty. And she said, "Oh, poor dog, you must be thirsty. Here, have a drink." And she gave the dog a drink. Then she took the dog back to the spring so he could have all the water that he needed. And when she filled up the dipper, she noticed something was different. It didn't look old and tin anymore. It looked kind of silvery and shiny. It let off light. And so she carried it carefully on the old trail, trying to go home. And she almost made it home when she met an old man. And he said, "I'm very thirsty. Please give me some water." She said, "Here, drink." And he drank the whole dipper full of water. And then she took him back to the spring so he could have all the water he wanted. And when she went to fill the dipper up, it was gold, shiny gold, bright shiny gold. She filled it up and it was so bright it was like a light. She could see her way home very easily. And she walked all the way home with the dipper full of water. She gave it to her mother, and her mother drank the water. Oh, it tasted so good. As soon as she finished the water, the dipper changed into 7 diamonds. And they started flying around the cottage. They were so bright, and all of a sudden they flew right out the window. And they flew up into the sky. And they made the shape of the dipper. To this very day, if you look up into the sky, it's still there. The end. Anybody ever heard that story before? So now you know how the dipper got up.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're doing a star unit or something, and you want to, that's when you tell that story, and then they go out that night, especially if you know it's going to be a clear night, which is pretty rare around here, but it happens once in a while. And those are just fun. Now, how many of you imagine pictures in that story? Still have imaginations. They still work. If you watch too much television, you know what happens? It sucks the imagination right out of your brain. Pretty soon you got to have a screen to see anything, right? Because imagination is the ability to create a picture with your mind. And children are experts at it. They love doing it. So there's very few things in that story that they haven't seen before. They've probably seen an old man. Maybe they've never seen a dipper. That's the hard one for them. But you want to find stories like that. Now, scary stories are another thing. You like scary stories? Children love scary stories. They don't like gory stories. They don't like heads being chopped off and that kind of stuff. But they love a story that has suspense. They've never had it before. And it creates this feeling in them of they're a little bit afraid, but when the story's over, everything's okay. Okay? So I'm going to tell you a scary story. Is that okay? Everybody's okay? Nobody's on heart medication? Now, I introduced this story by saying, this story is so scary, it's going to make you jump right out of your shoes. And if you don't have shoes on, this story is so scary, it'll make you jump right out of your socks. And if you don't have socks on, this story is so scary, it'll make you jump right out of your skin. Once upon a time, there was a boy and girl who lived in a place called Surrey. Every morning when they woke up, they began to search around their house. They looked under the bed. They looked in the toy box. They looked in the dresser drawer. And then they went downstairs. They looked under the couch. They looked behind the TV. They looked in the refrigerator, and they even looked in the garbage can. I'll tell you what they were looking for. The boogeyman. And they'd seen him, too. He was about as big as a mouse, and they were going to squish him, but the boogeyman ran away. They searched for him. They looked all day long. They looked under the carpets. They looked under the cushions. They looked in all the drawers. They looked in all the cupboards. And then they looked in the closet. And there he was. Won't he now? He was all the way up to the ceiling. He was huge and hairy and scary and kind of stinky. They wanted to kick him out of the house. But he changed sizes. He made himself so small they couldn't find him anymore. They looked all day long. No boogeyman. At night they got out their flashlights and they went up to the attic. No boogeyman up there. They went down to the basement. No boogeyman down there. Well, finally it was time to go to bed. So they went to their room and they locked the door. They turned on all the lights. They took a towel and stuffed it under the crack of the door so the boogeyman couldn't come under the crack. They put tissue paper in the keyhole so the boogeyman couldn't come through the keyhole. Then they looked everywhere. Under the pillows, under the blankets, under the sheet, under the mattress, under the bed. They looked in all their pockets. They looked in all their socks. They looked in all their shoes. There was no boogeyman. So they began to turn off the lights one by one. There was only one light left, a little light right next to the bed. They got under the covers and looked. Didn't see a boogeyman. They listened. Didn't hear a boogeyman. And there was no boogeyman. So they reached over, turned off the light. It was very dark, and very quiet in that room. When a little voice said, "I'm here." I saw a few people jump. The door ruined the whole thing. You see, I had you all just, what's going to happen? You know, and that's what suspense is. You're waiting for something to happen. And they'll always laugh at the end of that story and say, "Do it again." Because I took them somewhere. It's an experience. Storytellers used to call it Storyland, the land of make-believe. You go to it. How many of you visualized yourself in the bed? Okay? Or up in the attic, or anything that I said. And so you're like on a journey. You went somewhere. And when I went, rah, it brought you back so fast. And when you do it with kids, they jump this high off the ground sometimes. A few of you you were hypnotized enough that you, oh my God. You know? It's shock. And it's called startling somebody, really. It's not really scary. Because that really wasn't scary, right? No. Nobody was scared. When somebody tells you a scary story, you have to put your hand over your face. There's opposition to scary stories by some people. They say, "Oh no, you shouldn't tell children scary stories because, you know, it's too gory." They don't have to be gory. But there's a real purpose behind them, and that is learning to deal with fear. Okay? If you're scared for just 2 minutes like that, and you get over it, then it's easier to get over it the next time. Because you've experienced those feelings of being scared. So somebody who doesn't get scared at all, and all of a sudden has a scary experience, they go through a greater emotion. It's more frightening. I quit watching television, reading the news for over 10 years. Didn't watch any movies. I was living way out in the country. And no electricity. We were using oil lamps and chopping wood. And finally, we got electricity and we rented a VCR. You probably don't know what a VCR is, right? No, I'm just kidding. A tape player, right? And we watched this movie called The American Werewolf in London. First movie we had watched in 10 years. And it's an awful movie. Well, I couldn't sleep that night. And we didn't watch the whole thing. We even turned it off before it was over. It was so upsetting. Because we hadn't had, somebody who watches horror movies all the time, it's fun. They're used to it. And that's the way children, they haven't had this experience yet of something scary. Goldilocks and the Three Bears, that's a scary story. The bear's looking at them like he's lying in bed. That's suspenseful. What's going to happen? Now, they all know the story because their parents read it to them. But anybody get really frightened by that story? The boogeyman? Good, because I didn't want anybody to get totally scared. There's also a boogie woman story. You got to have a boogie woman too. That's a Native American story from this region of the country.